Welcome to Latte with a Lawyer, a podcast dedicated to bringing you the stories of some of America's most successful lawyers, figuring out what makes them tick, how they creatively solve problems, and how others aspiring to be them can follow in their footsteps.
Okay, hey, welcome folks to another episode of Latte with a Lawyer. I'm your host, Jonathan Brickman, and this afternoon we have with us Travis McDermott with the law firm of Partridge Snow Hahn. Good to have you, Travis.
Thanks, good to be here.
Absolutely. I know it's the afternoon, but just to keep with the Latte with a Lawyer theme, what's your favorite morning beverage?
For a morning beverage, I'd have to go traditional. I'm a coffee guy. I have recently transitioned in the afternoon, however, to Red Bull.
Wow.
Because I need the caffeine one way or the other.
Wow, you're a hardcore caffeine guy.
Yeah, fortunately and unfortunately, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I switched to seltzer after like noon. I have my 3+ cups of coffee, and then in the afternoon I'm hydrating again.
I try to keep it to 3 for the day, but I got to space them out.
All right, there you go. It's good stuff. Well, you guys are working hard, so you gotta stay alert. You're like a professional athlete. Caffeine's good for that, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Gotta get to the finish line, right?
You got to get to the finish line. So I was looking at your background. Are you from New England? You're from Rhode Island?
I am. So I grew up here and then moved away. I went to law school in California, and I started.
Not just California. I saw Pepperdine as like one of my favorite places in the world. So I mean, Malibu. I know exactly where that is. That's great.
Yeah, it was a challenge to focus on law school and studies and exams when right outside the door is that beautiful vista. But Pepperdine's a great place.
Yeah. That's a really beautiful area. I love it. And it's hard to get to, right? So it keeps people away somewhat.
It is. It's hard to get from there to anywhere too.
Right.
All the highways out there, but to get out to that area, you're taking Pacific Coast Highway pretty much.
Yes.
But yeah, so I eventually moved back to, now I live about 20 minutes, half an hour from where I grew up.
Okay. Where'd you grow up? What city?
North Kingstown, Rhode Island.
Okay.
Which is South County, like kind of now down to the beaches, Newport, that area.
Yeah. No, I'm a Bostonian, so I know exactly where that is.
Yep.
So you're on the coast. You're still back on the coast, which is good.
Yeah. You gotta be able to see an ocean. I mean, that's just.
Yeah. I get it. I live now in South Florida, so I've got the ocean, but just warmer. It's just a warmer ocean.
I'm glad we're doing this interview in the summer, so you can't lord it over me that it's 80 degrees where you are.
Correct. But down here, believe it or not, contrary to what people may believe, because you're surrounded by water everywhere, it's actually not so bad. I mean, definitely it's hot, but it gets really hot in New England too. You don't have it's just as muggy and sticky here. You constantly have like that tropical breeze. It's not so bad, particularly in the evening. It cools off. It's really it's okay.
All right. I mean, that's a good pitch for Florida. I don't think I'm going to move, but thank you.
Yeah. Well, there's other reasons not to move here, but you definitely you get used to it, the weather quickly, and after like late October, November, then it cools off and it's beautiful for quite some time. So that's it. I'm not going to pitch it anymore.
Okay.
Anyway, so let's talk about the kind of law practice you have. Tell us about that.
Sure. So Partridge Snow Hahn is, it's a business focused general practice firm. So we do real estate, we do a lot of transactional work, we do quite a bit of litigation work, but primarily, business focused. A lot of our clients they're small business clients, but banks, insurance companies, kind of the whole financial universe.
Okay.
Is where we primarily operate. So I do commercial litigation. And then I also do quite a bit of like government regulatory work. So defending against enforcement actions, or currently the sort of the hot thing that's going on is Rhode Island just changed its laws on cannabis. Oh. And so right now we're kind of awaiting the rollout of how it's actually going to work. I mean, the legislature has passed a statute. We have legalized marijuana.
Recreational?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, effective the law passed this summer. Right now we're waiting for how it's actually going to be rolled out in terms of how do you do licensing, what are the regulations going to be. But the bill passed earlier this year pretty overwhelmingly, frankly, after a strong push last year to do so that fell just short of the goal line. But part of the reason for that, no doubt, was Massachusetts has had legalized recreational marijuana for a while, and I don't know, half of the billboards on our highways are about dispensaries in Massachusetts. So it seemed like pretty low-hanging fruit for Rhode Island to, join the party, so to speak.
That makes sense. I mean, I think eventually we'll all probably get there.
Yeah, it seems that way. But so for right now, that's, I'm not going to say it's the Wild West because that's not really accurate, but it is an open field right now in that there is no existing, structure for how the cannabis dispensary, process is going to work, how the licenses are going to work. All we have at this point really are like numbers and regions and a general idea that there's going to be a set of regulations that govern how these licenses get issued and the rest of it. So that will no doubt be a big area for the next couple of years. It's not often that a whole new industry just pops up overnight.
So would you work with the cannabis operators?
Yeah, and we have already with regard to medical. So I've worked on a couple of licensing issues, change of ownership, things like that for existing medical dispensaries here in Rhode Island.
Yep.
And then my firm has had a Massachusetts, we have an office in Boston, another one in New Bedford. So we've had a Massachusetts practice for a little while. Oh, I'm primarily in Rhode Island. I'm admitted in Mass, and I do some Massachusetts work as well.
Okay. Did you, how about are you admitted in California too, since you live there?
I'm not, I'm admitted in New York. When I graduated law school, moved to New York City to work at Latham Watkins. So giant firm, one of the biggest in the world, in a New York office and all that. Timing wise was not ideal though. It was the fall of 2008. And you may recall the economy fell apart.
I know it quite well.
And a lot of the New York finance-based clients that were sort of the bread and butter of Latham Watkins were right in the middle of that. Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers.
I knew you were going to say it. Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So that was where I started my career.
Oh, geez. In fact, I can tell you an interesting story. I'll give you the Reader's Digest, but I actually, when I was in a totally different business, Bear Stearns was a client of mine. And I had worked on this transaction with them for quite some time. It was probably a couple of years. And I just got approval from the head of procurement for a several $1 million deal on a Wednesday. On Friday, they rolled up the sidewalks. They were done.
Yeah. It was
very difficult. I remember that clearly. It's like one of my great sales stories.
Very difficult time. Yeah. And the after effects of that, the financial collapse there really impacted, the legal industry, but specifically Latham Watkins. For a time, it was even, kind of a go-to phrase. They'd say someone got Lathamed, meaning laid off from a law firm.
Oh, really? Oh, were they have more than other firms? They had a big financial service practice?
They definitely did. And ironically, that wasn't what I did at the firm, but, that a firm like that, they had something like 350 lawyers in New York, and, a bunch of their big clients were, no longer viable. So that was a tough time. And they laid off about a third of the lawyers in the New York office. And
did you, when you laid off? Were you laid off? Oh, that's why. Would you have stayed at like one of those at a big law firm?
Maybe not until today, but I certainly would have stayed at that time. 5 years was sort of what I had imagined when I took the job, that, that's enough time to really get your feet under you, get some experience, and then go find a job that's maybe a better fit and doesn't expect you to work 3,000 hours. But the problem was, go ahead, sorry.
No, I said, I thought you all like to work endless hours.
I don't mind working, but those hours can get pretty intense at the big firms.
Yeah.
The problem for me though was, I was like a baby lawyer. I had, a year of experience or less, and suddenly I'm looking for a job, and the places that I had, they were actively recruiting me months earlier. I couldn't get an interview. They weren't hiring someone off schedule, et cetera. And so I ended up going to a much smaller firm in the Berkshires in Western Mass.
Oh, wow.
that was a little general practice firm, about 15 lawyers. But in my mind, it was, it was a job. It was an opportunity to learn some practical stuff and kind of really get my feet under me. I was there for about 2 years, and then I saw an opportunity to move, back to Rhode Island, where I'd grown up, and I had family and everything else. Been here since.
Very good, excellent. Why did you become a lawyer? Tell me about that. How did that start?
Well, you probably had other guests say this, but I was one of those people that people kept telling me throughout my life I should probably be a lawyer. And part of that was I do like to, talk and argue and go back and forth. But also I like to learn about a lot of different things. I like to delve into something new and figure it out. And there's lots of parts of the legal profession that are exactly that. You're learning about other industries, you're dealing with experts in their fields. And I don't really mind the stress, high stakes stuff. That's just part of it. You don't get too, I'm a pretty even keel person, so I don't get too upset or too happy, frankly.
Yeah.
You have to maintain that, because, in any given day, you're dealing with a half a dozen different things with different clients or different opposing counsel with very different priorities and approaches. And so I find that for me, the best part of being a lawyer, at least the part that works best for me, it is that sort of even keel willingness to learn and dig into something new. That's served me pretty well in either a litigation context or, general advising. I have, clients call that aren't in a lawsuit and say, how do we deal with this situation? I like delving into a new problem. So.
Got it. Yeah. Fast-paced, project-oriented, you got a versatile, right? So, as opposed to just plugging away a long-term project, it sounds like, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, it's about, you're also figuring stuff out from scratch. How did this situation come to be? How can we show that wasn't the reason why something happened? And all kinds of different questions that pop up that require you to really, delve into, over the years, I've probably had to deal with, significant, specific expertise areas in, environmental stuff, in different industries, in, dealing with the government now in these regulatory matters that, all the rules and regulations governing banks and insurance companies on the federal and state level. It's just a lot of new stuff to sort of sort through, and I enjoy that process.
Got it. How big is a law firm? I mean, so you went from a big white shoe AM Law 100 firm to a tiny one. How big is this one?
Goldilocks sized.
Yeah, okay.
About 50, I think we have just shy of 50 lawyers, something like 48.
Okay.
Lawyers between 3 offices in Rhode Island, Massachusetts.
Okay. Well, that's a decent sized firm.
Yeah, it's big enough that we really have a varied, amount and areas of expertise, but it's small enough that I know everybody. I mean, I know them all by name, and we all are pretty collegial. It's a good environment, so I'm glad this is where I found myself for the bulk of my career, rather than some other places.
And you're a partner there, I see, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And you guys back in the office? Or you working remotely?
Back in the office, I think is the answer to your question. But because of COVID, like many places, we've definitely had a sort of a sea change in remote work. I mean, people do it now fairly routinely, and as long as the lines of communication are open, everyone's comfortable with that. Makes it a lot easier for everyone to deal with personal stuff that previously, made for some real headaches. It's nice to be able to say I'm working from home tomorrow and actually do that. And
not feel like you're looked down upon, right? Not negative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's interesting how fast it's changed. I mean,
it sure has. We were lucky. We were ahead of the curve a bit in terms of the technology. We have in-house IT staff, and just in the 2018-2019 period, we had rolled out, like, everyone has a mobile device now. I don't mean a phone, I mean laptops, iPads, things like that. So we didn't have a big technology spend to transition to full work from home.
Okay.
So like in March 2020, when everything kind of, shut down to some degree, we immediately went to remote work and stayed that way for about 6 months, pretty seamlessly, all things considered. Now it's been well over a year since the office is open. Everyone's invited back, but some people have found, slightly different arrangements work better for them now. So we have people doing 1 or 2 days at home, 3 days in the office, that sort of thing. And it's pretty flexible.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I think a lot of those things are going to stick, things that are just more efficient. So you don't have to travel for deposition or hearing, right?
Well, that's been one of the big impacts. Sure.
Yeah, no, that's pretty consistent. I hear from all you guys. And you litigate, right? So you go to court, you do jury trials?
I do. Yeah. So state and federal court, Massachusetts and Rhode Island. And although I'm admitted in New York, I don't really practice in New York. That was from the Latham days, and I keep my bar up to date, but I don't practice there. But Rhode Island, Mass, sure, yeah, lots of court appearances. I mean, jury trials are still pretty rare.
They still are, yeah. So
Yeah.
court appearances, meaning you're going before a bench?
Sure,
trial?
lots of dispositive motions to dismiss, summary judgments, discovery, wrangling, all of that kind of stuff. And the other thing is I have a pretty strong interest in dispute resolution. As we mentioned before, I went to Pepperdine, and the Strauss Institute at Pepperdine is really considered like the best dispute resolution program in the country.
Oh,
So while I was there, I got a master's in dispute resolution. So I have a real interest in that, and I've tried to use that to benefit clients, in that a lot of cases I mediate them, not as the mediator, but as a party advocate, but settle them. Like we settle a lot of them through that process. And I'm a firm believer that that's really how a lot of disputes should be resolved.
so what is it about? That's interesting. I mean, I've heard that a little bit recently. So that's a real structured program that teaches you how to mediate or come to a resolution between two parties. What kind of program is that they have at Pepperdine?
At Pepperdine? So it's a master's program. They also, I believe, have an LLM, but it's, I took courses in, negotiation, psychology, and then within negotiation stuff like cross-cultural negotiation and the kinds of things that you maybe wouldn't think about in terms of getting from A to B to resolve a dispute. Might not be about money, might not be about, specific undertakings that someone agrees to. It's surprising how often frank discussions, even an apology, moves the needle with a lot of people, even businesses, in the final stages of a dispute. There's often money that changes hands, but that's not necessarily all that happens to resolve it. And then the dispute resolution program also involved a lot of practical stuff. So I worked in the courts as a mediator for a year. I attended probably 50 or something settlement conferences with a judge in Los Angeles County Superior Court as an extern. So there's a lot of practical stuff like that.
Is it in the law school? Where does that program sit?
It's a separate school, but yeah, it sits within the law school. I mean, it's in the law school building.
Okay. And how many other schools have that program? I haven't heard of it.
I know for sure that Harvard does. That's
right.
Often, like the US News type rankings, that's often number 2 behind Pepperdine.
Okay.
But there are a bunch of others. I mean, there's a whole list of schools with those programs. And a lot of people who go to those for the masters do so like kind of mid-career, to make a transition from being an advocate or a gladiator
to be a neutral,
to be the neutral.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
And since I was there as a law student, I'd see these mid-career professionals trying to change out of being a lawyer. And I thought, they're all coming here to do this. I'm here now. So I started, taking those classes, and then ended up taking a master's while I was there.
Oh, interesting. So how does Pepperdine become number 1? To beat Harvard is pretty good. That's impressive.
Yeah. And this is consistent. This isn't like 1 year. This is like 12 out of 13 or something like that.
Wow.
I think partly the faculty, they get a lot of really great faculty from around the country or the world, no doubt, because they can pitch Malibu, California to a visiting faculty member.
Yeah.
And then there's a real emphasis at the school that this is a kind of a crown jewel for them, and they want to maintain it. So they put a lot of effort into, they do, seminars and CLE type things all the time. And now as an alum, I get the invites to come to Malibu for 3 days for training.
Nice.
It is inviting.
Oh, I bet. I was just in Los Angeles for You may know about the group Trial Lawyers University.
Yeah.
They started out actually during COVID in Los Angeles by a trial attorney, Dan Ambrose. And they had a 3 or 4 day event out there in Marina Del Rey. And they had some of the big name trial attorneys. And hundreds of them come together to learn from each other. CLE.
Yeah.
So I got to spend a few days in LA.
Not too bad.
I always love to go there. It's great.
I do. I miss it a little bit. I mean, I do. It was every winter.
Yeah. Well, it's easier to come to the East Coast. That's why because I'm an East Coast person, easier just to drop down south and fly across the country.
Mm-hmm.
So still didn't convince you yet. I know.
No. Not yet.
Okay. Well, we got another couple minutes. Maybe I can convince you. So give me an example of like a case that stands out that you worked on that was really interesting.
Sure. So I'm going to skip anything I'm working on right now. Let's think about, so you mentioned jury trials before. So one experience I did have with a jury trial was a 6-week trial in federal court. So it was a significant jury trial, an environmental cleanup case involving a waterway in Boston. And without getting too deep into the weeds, the waterway had been cleaned up of PCB contamination, and the entities that cleaned it up were seeking contribution from other potentially responsible parties.
Yep.
But it was a very interesting case because a huge number of the relevant facts related to, industrial manufacturing in the 1950s, because the contamination wasn't recent. And most of the neighborhood had really turned over since its days as an industrial powerhouse. So former circuit breaker facility manufacturing was now a supermarket, and a former, this is like they make autoclaves and something else, was now a charter school, right? So there were current owners.
Was it the Charles River?
It was not the Charles River. It was tributary to the Neponset River.
Oh, so south. Okay, like Quincy.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, so that area. And then, so the trial, though, involved both the current owners, who were these, they had nothing to do with the contamination other than that their property was adjacent to the waterway.
They had a lot of issues with that super fun stuff, right, where people got pulled into it because being adjacent to the contaminated property.
Yeah, and then there's different rules governing, current operators and past operators and who can get tagged with liability. It was very interesting, and it was very thorny. And at different points, I spent, innumerable hours going through like microfiche records of manufacturing in the 50s to try to show what was being built at these facilities. Some of them, none of the employees were still, around or alive. I mean, we tried to hunt down some of them, but somebody who retired in 1962 is probably not available to testify in 2015.
Right.
So that was a very interesting case. And it frankly is still ongoing in some ways, because the Neponset River that that waterway was a tributary to, there's an ongoing cleanup and an initial process, I guess, right now for that waterway. So some of the stuff from that lawsuit is actually still, sort of playing out.
Oh, interesting. So who were you advocating for?
We were representing the property owner that did the cleanup initially. And interestingly, it was like the lone holdout that was still operating like a manufacturing industrial facility in the midst of this neighborhood that had largely turned over to, more residential and retail. So we were representing an entity that was still manufacturing stuff. They were no longer using PCBs, but they were still in business on that location.
You were defending them?
Well, we were technically the plaintiff there because we were pursuing cost recovery against the other, past operators and current owners. So, we were technically the plaintiff in a cost recovery action.
Oh, and did you prevail?
Not as well as we would have hoped. Part of the challenge there really was factual, trying to establish what was going on in 1962 when there's no witnesses and all you've got are documents. Tough to show the sort of day-to-day practical stuff that we all know happens at an industrial site, like how did their waste streams get carted away? there was never really any documentation of it. So that's a tough thing to prove.
Right. Interesting. And so that case is still going on, still dragging on.
I mean, the case that we were involved in, it ended, 3 years ago. But there are, after effects, because that tributary is just part of a whole system of waterways that the state regulators and the EPA are still, looking at and trying to clean up.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. So that was an interesting case. What's sort of your typical stuff you work on? Say, I know you spend a lot of time in cannabis now, but.
Yeah. I mean, right now I have a handful of, I actually have a handful of cases involving COVID tests.
Oh.
Because if you can remember back to the, ye old days of 2020, 2021, when there were shortages of these tests, you can imagine the market out there for procuring those tests was pretty wild. International sourcing during the pandemic, a lot of quick turnarounds on deals, and a lot of companies working with international companies they'd never dealt with before. And so I have a couple right now where there's still fights going on over failure to deliver test kits that were ordered, ages ago, because of all the bottlenecks and limitations on just the actual tests, getting them from a manufacturer in China to a state government in New England, for instance.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, there are a lot of those little cottage industries that popped up. People create masks coming out of China and all these places.
Yep. So there was actually one of the cases involved some efforts to procure and source PPE. I mean, the stuff we were all hearing about in the news in 2020, now 2 years later, we're seeing like the commercial disputes that arose out of that playing out.
Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, do you like to get in front of a jury? I mean, is that something you look forward to doing? I know.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
I like, I mean, I like the whole process of trying to bring people around to your way of thinking. And, as opposed to banging your head against the wall by talking to opposing counsel. I mean, they're getting paid literally not to agree with you. That's a tough challenge. But a jury, I mean, blank slate, right? They're just folks. They're just people like you and me. And you're trying to present the best case you can to them for why your view is correct. I enjoy that. Same with the judges. And in some ways, bench trials or hearings with a judge are easier because you never know what a juror is bringing to the table in terms of how they view things, what their politics are, all kinds of stuff. With a judge, they're a lawyer, they're trained in this way of thinking, and the key words that are going to get a reaction and so forth.
Yep. Yeah, interesting. Well, I mean, it's fun. I've talked to so many different lawyers, and some love the fight and go into jury trial. Others not interested. No interest.
I'm more interested in the process that leads up to it. Frankly, I like the accumulating all the information and coming up with a list of all the things I know we can prove and all of that stuff. I really enjoy that process. The actual going in front of the jury and you're dealing with opposing counsel and the rest of it, I don't mind it, but I don't find that's not the thrill of it. That's like the part you have to get through to get your client what they want or what they need.
Okay.
It's the process, the part that I enjoy just on a, this is actually fun to do level is figuring stuff out, digging into something, and being in a position to, for instance, cross-examine the other side's expert. To get to the point where you can do that, you really need to learn a lot about their subject area, because otherwise they're going to talk circles around you.
Right. Okay. So you must have been a good student.
I was a pretty good student.
Yeah.
I have a bit of a tech background, which helps too. Before I was a lawyer, I was like a technical writer, and I installed high-end, basically we built mission control at NASA. And we would build these command centers for telecom companies, government agencies, stuff like that. And that was my job out of college for a few years before law school. So
okay.
I had a computer science degree, and I had that tech background, and that stuff helps a lot with, the sort of specialty areas where you're dealing with, scientific stuff or technical stuff. Got
it. Interesting. Yeah. It's fine. I talked to someone today that went right from undergrad to law school, which I don't think people do so much anymore, right?
I didn't. I mean, I was about 5 years in between. I got married in between. I mean, I had a whole life as an adult before I started law school, it felt like.
Yeah. Do you think it's better to wait?
I mean, I think it was the right call for me anyway. You know, if I had gone straight from undergrad to law school, I don't think I would have appreciated or treated law school as seriously as I did, which put me in a position to graduate at the top of my class and get a job at Latham Watkins and all of that. If I had just gone straight through, I'm sure I would have done fine, but I don't know that I would have been so serious about it in the way that I was.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. I think that makes sense. And just having real experience, I'm sure makes the classroom environment much more interesting, right? And relevant. Yeah.
Yeah. And having been out there in the world, you know, rent an apartment, and, you know, I got married, like I said, and you just, you know, you come into law school with a little bit more experience of the real world than people who went straight from high school to college to law school, who've never, you know, had to pay a phone bill or whatever.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I went to business school, and it was the same kind of thing. You saw kids that just went right from undergrad to graduate school. They had really no clue, versus the people that worked a few years and then went back to school.
Yeah. Now, I don't know if working in the legal field would have changed anything for me, because my job out of college was not in any way related to the law. I mean, it was, like I said, it was this technical job. But I did, you know, I went to school and have colleagues and friends now who work, you know, as a paralegal or as a legal assistant or something or other, and then decided, yes, I like this, I want to go to law school.
Yeah, that's a pretty typical track too, isn't it? From paralegal to lawyer.
I think so. I think some people want to kind of dip a toe, and, you know, spending 180 grand on law school or whatever, that's a lot to find out if you like something.
Yeah, yeah, it sure is. Is that what it is now? 180 grand?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. Luckily I had some scholarship money, so law school wasn't, you know, I didn't have to borrow the full amount, but I did have to live in Los Angeles for 3 years, and that's not free.
Yeah, that's an expensive place to live for sure. Interesting. Well, listen, I won't take up too much more of your time here. Just parting words. What do you want people to know about you, and what's the best way to get in touch with you?
People to know about me, that I am I'm a reasonable person with varied interests and knowledge, who's happy to learn something new. I think that's a big piece of like kind of who I am. So I think that's important to know. But on a you know, just professional level, that me and my firm handle, you know, commercial litigation and general legal practice for, you know, commercial and business focused stuff throughout Massachusetts and Rhode Island. We have this firm's been around for 33 years now, so we're not going anywhere. And the best way to reach me is my work email. So our firm's website is psh.com, and you know, I'm listed there, including my email and phone number. But most of my colleagues, depending on what somebody has a need for, we have a stable of great attorneys, and I'm among them, but not the only one. We have a lot of great attorneys here who can help with just about any commercial related issue anybody has.
Good stuff. Well, good. Well, listen, thanks again. And we've had with us today Travis McDermott from Rhode Island by way of Pepperdine, California. Partridge Snow Hahn. So it was good to spend time with you. Thanks again. And this is sponsored by EmotionTrac, which is a legal tech platform, and we help litigators do case prep for mediation with neutrals and mediators, or go to trial with our platform. So good to spend time with you, Travis.
You too, Jonathan. Thanks a lot.
All right, bye.